Namaskaram. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the viewers. I'm Mohinder Gandasala, accompanied by Mrs. Vidya Vijay, and we welcome you all to the Sambashan discussion series. Sambash is an open community of like-minded Indians in different spheres of life, from IT to accounting, from students to professors to retired seniors living in Europe. We come together to discuss the real Indian culture, art, and cultural to help our followers develop a better understanding of Indian culture. I'll pass it on to Mrs. Vibha Vijay to introduce our guest for the day, and we all wish you a very happy Independence Day.
Namaste. Today we have the pleasure of having with us Lieutenant General P.R. Shankar, retired. Lieutenant General P.R. Shankar is a retired Director General of Artillery. He is an alumnus of the National Defence Academy Khadakwasla, the Defence Services Staff College Wellington, the Army War College Mao, Naval Postgraduate School Monterrey, and the National Defence College New Delhi. He has held many important command, staff, and instructional appointments in the Army. In his career spanning 4 decades, he has achieved a vast operational experience, having served in all kinds of terrain and operational situations which have confronted the Indian Army. Lieutenant General P.R. Shankar has given great impetus to the modernization of the artillery through indigenization. He has deep knowledge, understanding, and experience in successful defense planning and acquisition spanning over a decade. Some of the notable projects that have come to fructification due to his relentless efforts are the major 155 gun projects like the Dhanush, the M777 ultralight howitzer, and the K9 Vajra, rocket and missile projects related to the Pinaka, BrahMos, and the Grad BM21, surveillance projects like the Swati WLR, and a few other ammunition projects. So has also received many commendments and military decorations for his services, like starting with the Vishishta Seva Medal in 2009 for counter-insurgency operations in the Northeast, then the Ati Vishishta Seva Medal for commanding the artillery division, and the Param Vishishta Seva Medal for the modernization of artillery in 2017. The general officer now is a professor in the aerospace department of the Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, Chennai. He is actively involved in applied research. He is also a very active commentator on the defense space, and his articles are available at www.gunnershot.com. So we are very happy and privileged to have you with us, sir, today on the show, and we look forward to a very engaging discussion with you.
Thanks a lot, Vibha, for that generous introduction. At the outset, happy Independence Day to all the viewers, wherever you are and whatever time zones you are. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. And I'm looking forward to interacting with a whole lot of you. It gives me great pleasure to know that people across the continents are keen to see such interactions and get to know your country better. Let's start.
Thank you,
Okay.
sir. It's an honor to have you, and just having you with us is really inspiring and motivating. Um, we'll get started with the questions. The first one we wanted to touch upon was the defense spend. The defense is a very strategic issue, and defense planning is very critical for the overall national security, and something that's constantly evolving with the changing geopolitical conditions and international security order. And it's a known fact that India's defense spend is the third largest, while Indian Army is the second largest. However, with the continuous increasing budget, there are also news and media reports stating that only a small percentage is going towards the modernization, while the rest of it is going towards existing programs and other related items. So we're just wondering if you can share some thought on the actual defense spend, and are we adequately spending to build a stronger defense given our neighbors and the insurgencies and conflict mode across the year?
Right. That's a very huge question, but I'll try and take it on in as simple terms as possible. At the outset, uh, no amount of defense spending is enough for a country. The amount we spend on defense in the country has to be balanced out with what we can afford. taking into considerations or economic growth or social considerations and everything else. And then second, we also have to see at what level are we and what is our threat perceptions. Based on our threat perceptions, we have to spend what we have to on our defense. Now, if you look at the overall structure, we've been quite balanced for quite some time, notwithstanding what people say. Today, we have the capability to handle our enemies or adversaries, whichever way you look at it. But if you say, do we have the capability to be a great power? We might not have the capability, and for that we have to spend a little more. Are we modern enough? We might not be modern enough. No, if you want to modernize and if you want to be a great power, right? We have to spend more. We have to spend more on, modernization. There's no doubt about it. There's enough commentary on that, and I'll not debate that also. But there's a flip side to this. We must also understand that the armed forces serve a great social need. You know, you have so many people in the armed forces. There's a huge source of employment, and when you have so much armed forces deployed all over, it generates economic output wherever armed forces are. So the armed forces drives the economy, even if you spend on personnel in a different manner, right? So all is not lost. Yes, definitely, we need to spend more on modernization. We need to spend more on indigenization, and we need to have a more modern army. That's a constant effort. Uh, I hope I put across the fundamentals of what you are aiming at. Yeah.
Yes, it's true, because the ecosystem that the army supports, it's much bigger than the army itself.
Yes.
When in our pre discussions, although I mean a family of armies too, but then like the amount that supports that they end up supporting is multiple
Much
times.
more.
So
It's not
exactly.
only you not only support the immediate family and your family structure and in your villages and all that. You also support, say, there's a cantonment. There's a city. A whole lot of things come up in the city because of the army. The infrastructure in the city starts coming up, right? So it is just not a personal thing. So there's an infrastructural issue also which comes up. And if you see, some of our best cantonments are also the best places in each city. Okay, they are the pride of each city. They look after the environment. They're the lungs of the city, right? And they give a lot of value to the city. So there are a lot of things. It's just not a straight equation to say, oh, we don't spend enough of our on our defense and modernization. Ultimately, we have to. It doesn't matter how modern we are. We have to fight our adversary and stop him wherever he is. Yeah.
So we are talking about India being today the third largest spender on defense. For the year 2020-21, our defense budget is earmarked to be $65.86 billion and US dollars, yes. And we recently saw a lot of excitement and media coverage around the procurement of the Rafale uh, planes. And Can you just walk us through how an entire defense procurement works? Because there are multiple parties involved, and it's almost like a project management approach that one has for it. So you also have worked in, indigenization attempts. So when would you look at an indigenization or manufacturing in-house versus procurement, and something on shed us some light on those?
Sure. See, first and foremost, we have any procurement is first viewed against what you need. The
Okay.
first thing is you establish what you need, and what you need is established over a 50-year horizon. You look at it over a 50-year horizon and see who your adversaries are, what your threats are, what your national interests are, and for all these things put together, what is it that you should have? When you look at a 50-year horizon, many things you don't understand because technologies of 50 years are well over the horizon. So you say, okay, I'll look at it in the next 50 years. This is where the region is going to be. This is where India is going to be in the comity of nations. Then you make a plan for about 15 years. You say, okay, in the next 15 years, I have to develop this capability. And that capability is based on a plan called the long-term integrated perspective plan, which the Army, Navy, and the Air Force do put it together, and then the National Integrated Perspective Plan, which is there in the MOD. Now, that 15-year horizon also doesn't let you procure immediately. It lets you prepare, right? You know that this is what you need over the next 15 years, and some of it is available immediately. Then you do some prioritization, what you need in the first 5 years, what you need in the next 5 years, and what you need in the next third lot of 5 years. So then you come down to this 5-year plan. And once you come to that 5-year plan, you then say, okay, my most important thing where I want, I'll put it into the cycle of procurement. So that's when the procurement actually starts, right? When a lot of things. So then what you do is you say, okay, let's take a case, a gun. I want to buy a gun. If I want to buy a gun, I have to see what is this gun I need for, and what am I going to do with this gun, and all that. And then you see what are the capabilities I want out of this gun. And then the next thing you see is who are the guys who can give me this gun? Do I have to depend on Indian manufacturers, or should I go abroad? What are the technologies I want? What are the technology level which is there in this country? Can it give me that gun or not? So all these things you put together, and then you put out something called a RFI, which is similar to any other request for information which is there in any business cycle. So you put out an RFI. Only thing is, in the defense ecosphere, you don't put out a generalized RFI to anyone whom you want. You give it to people who you know have some capabilities, because generally we have a system by which we know who's got what capability in the world, right? Then we also see whether we should go and buy it off a government. It could be a government-to-government transaction also. There's just so many ways. Or should you develop it on your own? There are a lot of options. So you take an option, you put out an RFI. Once you put out an RFI, there's some response. Once that response comes, then you see, okay, what am I thinking? What I want to buy, is it available? If not now, in the next 5 years, 10 years, does someone have the capability to do that? So you do this analysis, and then you say, okay, I need this gun. There are, say, 5 to 6 people who are prepared to give it to me. It could be Indian, it could be foreign. That's a choice you have to make, depending on a whole lot of issues. And then you put out something called the RFP. That is a request for proposal. That's like a tender. So then you put out the tender, and those people respond. Once they respond, then you evaluate all of them on paper and say, are these people fit to be even considered? Are they talking sense or nonsense? Right? Then you say, okay, I say 5 chaps respond to you, reject on technical grounds or whatever the legal grounds or things like that. And then you say those 3 people who are left over, you say, get your equipment for trials. You try the equipment out. After you go through, try the equipment out. It is not that 1, 2, 3 you classify. You say, okay, does this equipment pass a threshold? Because anything which passes a threshold is good enough for you. And then you see, okay, what does it cost me to buy any of this? So you open something called his, cost. What is his bid? One is a technical bid and one is the cost bid. So then you see, okay, if these 3 chaps meet my requirement, who's the cheapest of the lot? Then you carry out a contract negotiation. You negotiate the cost and everything, and then you go for the contract. So there's a very well laid out process. In between, you can always, anytime, you can take the call. Should I develop it indigenously? Should I go through the government? Should I upgrade? At times, you need an equipment immediately. Like right now, we are in a problem with China, right? And if suppose you need a gun, it's better to upgrade an old gun into a new gun with minimal input of technology, because the time frame is faster, the cost is lesser, everything, rather than going for a new gun which will come after 10 years. Right? So there's so many issues in this, and everything is factored in. It's a very logical process. Much against what people think in the newspapers and all that, it's not so. Let me tell you, It took me about 10 years of hard work to get in, three 155 guns into our service. And it took me a lot of hard work to get the Pinaka rocket system into our service. It's indigenous and it's about to be exported also. So there are a lot of good things happening. A lot of countries are after us, give us the Pinaka weapon system. Say 10 years back, not even 10 years back, 5, 6 years back, if people had seen in the newspaper, it would have come out that look, India is short of ammunition. We don't have ammunition for our guns and all that, right? But today we are facing China and we might get into a war like situation with them. Has anyone spoken that we don't have ammunition? No, because everything has changed. I'm on it. Right? So there's a lot of logic in what happens in this procurement thing, right? Like Rafales. Despite all the fracas which has happened about the Rafale, we still say that's the weapon which is going to make a difference between us and China when the push comes to the shove, right? So these things, right? The next thing about weapon systems procurement and everything, I call it a decadal process. It takes a decade to buy a weapon system. It is not something which is readily available anywhere. No one's got a shop like Amazon or Google, where you can order a weapon system. No one's got in the world. It's all
So
made.
there's no $1 billion sale for this.
No, there's no sale. No, nothing of that kind. So that's how it is. And I did a major, go through with the Americans. It took me 6 years to come to a deal with the US government for the ultralight howitzer. And it took us 2 trips for us to go there and 2 to 3 trips for them to come here and push the deal through. Right? Of course, now that gun, I'm very glad, is deployed in Ladakh.
Oh, that's wonderful. When you're actually seeing something that you do actually in production, that's wonderful.
And it's a top of the line gun.
And you brought an interesting fact over here that like there are many countries that are looking for the Indian developed weapon system. Could you just share some lights on that, because that never seems to come out on the public media or something of that sort?
I agree with you. That is because for a long time India was not prepared to export weapon systems. 3-4 years back, a decision was taken. Enough of it. You want to be a global power, you must sell weapons. You must sell arms. Selling arms is not just making money; it's also military diplomacy. If Sri Lanka has weapons which are akin to what I have, he is dependent on me, I am dependent on him. Right? So you're interdependent from that point of view also. For example, if I am buying an American gun, the ultra-light howitzer, I am dependent on USA, he is dependent on me. So there's a strategic partnership between India and USA. So these, the issues of partnerships and alliances are also presaged on weapon development and export. So 3 years back, we started this process, and now we've started picking up. Of course, this Pinaka, we are not giving it to anyone because it is still a little high tech, and we don't want to part with the technologies lest it goes into the wrong hands. Maybe 2-3 years down the line, when we have a better technology, Pinaka will then give it off, which is what everyone does. The best technology is kept in house, and the second or the slightly older technology is given out. Even that will be very good for people. They'll take it. So that's my take on defense exports. Yeah.
So when it comes to indigenization, how do we look at it? Do we understand it as something that is developed and manufactured completely in-house, or are we also looking at these strategic partnerships that we have? We have technology transfer from US or Russia or France for that matter, and we do the AIT model, assembly, integrate and test. Is that also considered to be indigenization?
Yeah, I'll put it this way. You see, indigenization has different connotations. You could do part indigenization, full indigenization, or midway. Right? And it depends on how you deal with this, how you take the deal through. Okay. Now, since you spoken of AIT, assembly integration and testing, they are not. This is a model which we use for the ultralight howitzer. Let me explain to you. Uh, at one point of time in 2013, the ultralight howitzer which we were getting from USA was to be completely bought out from them. Just buy and use. But then when the Make in India thing started around 2014, right? They came and said, look, and somehow we were not comfortable with buying the whole gun, right? Then the Americans and the Britishers, the BAE systems, they are the chaps who make this gun. They said, can we do Make in India? I said, fine, no problems. So we went in for this Make in India, and they came up with this AIT concept, Assembly, Integration and Testing in India. And that's being done in India by Mahindras, right? Even that was not very comfortable for us, for me, especially. I didn't like that he will get parts from all over the world and just assemble it and integrate it and give it to us was something which is not this thing. So I said, okay, develop all the support systems in India for that, which he did. Now, this gun is all of titanium. 80% of the gun is titanium, and we didn't have the titanium technology. So, when he started making this gun here, or rather assembling this gun here, I insisted that the space of this gun should come henceforth from India itself, which meant he had to part. They had to part with the titanium technology, and believe you me, today 3 years down the line, just 3 years down the line, after the first integration started, there is a firm in Lucknow which has imbibed all the titanium technology, and BAE Systems is buying spares for this M777 gun from Lucknow and exporting it outside. And I mean, for us, the guns are new. We don't need space so fast, and we have space for the next 3 to 4 years. Our requirement was to have space 3 years, 4 years hence, indigenously. But BAE Systems found value that giving it to Indian firm now, and now from India it is going abroad. So many things happen. There's nothing straight in this business. It's only how you capture the moment and how you apply yourself to making it indigenous. And if you take a system like Pinaka, almost everything is indigenous. Right? All our missile systems are indigenous. All our space systems are indigenous. We have a lot of technology. I am quite sanguine about that. Yeah.
So that's wonderful, because right now, recently, the defense minister Rajnath Singh ji had announced that like there's a progressive embargo to be implemented from 2020 to 24 on 101 weapons, and this is like according to the Atmanirbhar Bharat, or the self-reliant India. So I think this is going to add more fuel to this kind of a program or initiative. Would that be right?
Yeah, definitely. Because 101 items now today, see, all the gun systems which Vibha spoke of are all there in that list. All the ammunition systems which are there on that list. The WLR is on that list. The gun towers are all on that list. So, in fact, what I indigenize out of 110, 10%, about 110 items are on that list. Around 10, 11 items are on that list. And those are best of the items which can be made today in India. And so, and this should increase over a period of time. This should increase. If you are going to be a power of reckoning, we have to increase. There's no doubt about it. So I am very clear that we must indigenize. We should export defense equipment as part of earning money, getting technology, as also developing military diplomacy. All three issues are involved.
So just a follow-up question on this. So recently there was this, a whole program to avoid the made in China products. But then the key issue over there was India does not have the infrastructure to cope with that kind of a sudden, stopping to use or stopping to import items from China. Similarly, if we take that same parallel to the military side, yes, we want to indigenize, we want to reduce our import costs and stuff, but do we have that kind of infrastructure? I understand we have the technology, but what about the infrastructural issues around that?
Yeah, we are developing. See, again, I'll take this example of Pinaka only. We took us 24 years to develop this rocket system. 24 years back, the L&T and Tatas were brought in and said, look, you make this rocket system. They said, we don't know how to make it. They said, okay, no problems. we'll give you technology, you be our technology partners and development partners. So with this technology, we've developed everything. And today they are the guys who are coming to us and saying, can we export? So we have the people to, you see, it takes time. These things take time. Uh, there are already half a dozen companies in India which are at that level. It's just that we have to spread the whole thing. We have to build a better defense industrial corridor. Right? It's very easy to today say, look, we don't do much. If you take 10 years, like I said, 10 years back, newspapers, you will see people spoke about. Yesterday only, I did an article on this. They said okay, there's a confused and lethargic artillery modernization process 10 years back. And
Okay.
today you are that very item is on the embargo that you don't want to buy from outside, but you're going to export. So things change. If you have the determination, it will change. So it's not something which is impossible. And we have the capability. India has the capability. It's a matter of this capability growing. Yeah.
So one question on research, of military research. Where are we currently on that? Because we have a lot of our research is controlled by the DRDO, and we don't have something or anything for incubating projects or a collaborative approach on research where we involve SMEs or private companies. Something on the lines of the DARPA that exists in the US. We're looking at that kind of thing. Wouldn't that be helpful? Or
See,
shouldn't we be working
yeah,
on those things?
you got a point. The DARPA is modeled differently, right? DARPA has got a total American this thing. We grew up in a different manner. Our culture is different. We have the DRDO to do that. To be fair to the DRDO, when you give a project to the DRDO, they are the ones who develop the MSMEs and the big players and the small players, and they develop the entire ecosystem and the production partners along with the research. If you take a technology scan, you have to understand this. I did a technology scan with India vis-a-vis China, and I found, as far as space research is concerned, missile research is concerned, and atomic energy research is concerned, all three have military connotations, right? We are at par with China, and everything is indigenous in this. There's nothing which is coming from outside, right? And including manufacturers, including everything. In fact, today there is a move going on. How do you convert people in Sivakasi who are making fireworks into making propellant for rockets? Because the fundamentals are the same. The fundamental technologies are the same. So it is not that the DARPA model is not there in India. It is in a different manner. It's in the Indian manner. But having said that, you have a point. We realize that the DARPA model connects the forces with the manufacturers better. So also today's disruptive technologies, when you talk of AI, you talk of robotics, you talk of electronics, IoT, all these are new materials, right? The DRDO model is a little outdated.
Right.
Okay. That's true of the American DARPA also. Even DARPA is outdated with these new disruptive technologies, right? So what we have done is we started something called the Army Design Bureau. The Army Design Bureau has started interacting with startups, MSMEs, giving exploring new technologies and things like that, and they are engaging this outside DRDO.
Okay.
Like I'm doing a project for the Army Design Bureau today in IIT Madras, and I am taking DRDO on my as my partner. So we have started engaging academics, right? So it's happening. Maybe we're a bit behind the curve at this point of time, but sooner or later we'll catch up. It's a matter of being confident about yourself. Uh, America itself has found that the DAPA model is not good for tomorrow's technologies. So they've started major projects where they've gone. For example, AI in US Army is it's a $3 billion project which is being carried out at the Carnegie Mellon University. right? By a set of army officers there. So it is not even going through DARPA. So you have to adopt different models. Yes, like I said, I must admit that we are behind the curve, but we're catching up.
It's interesting to know that universities and colleges are doing these kind of research projects for defense, and it'll be interesting to know. I mean, if there are more such colleges that have some sort of a course or a research program that is mandatory. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it will proliferate. We've just started this course in IIT Madras, which I've started after joining IIT Madras,
Okay.
where I teach MTech and MS and PhD students, and it's a co- and you know I teach them about defense technologies and give them the introduction to defense technology so that they relate whichever subject they take, they can relate to the defense technologies and get ahead. Hopefully, they'll get into startups or wherever they go, they take defense as an option so that there's a direct feed from IITs and good institutes into the defense field.
That's
So,
interesting because I think few months ago, if I'm not wrong, the army and announced they are trying to create a program to bring in civilians who are specialists in the
yeah,
civilian jobs.
yeah, this is part of the program. Right.
Okay,
There's also right, and that's why IIT took me. I'm not even an engineer. I've not done my BTech, nothing. But still, I'm a professor. I'm teaching people, and integrating with them based on my practical experience.
interesting.
So,
So one more question on the modern warfare, and I mean we were just discussing this. So modern warfare is not just on the battlefield, and it's there's a lot of technology in it, and there's a lot of warfare like cyber warfare, bio warfare. How is the Indian Army placed or structured to deal with this new kind of warfare, which doesn't happen just on the battlefields?
see, uh, let me put it this way: we're fighting it with China today. There is no. You see, the entire concept actually started at the turn of the century. Around 2000, somewhere 2000, 2001, there were two Chinese colonels who wrote a book called Unrestricted Warfare. And that one of them, Keel Young, I'm forgetting his name. All these Chinese names are quite, they don't come to me easily. So that set people thinking. The Americans came out with a concept about 10 years back uh, with a concept called the multi-domain warfare. And today, that multi-domain warfare is actually playing out. So, in this multi-domain warfare or the multi-domain operations, the traditional domains are the air, land, and sea. But you add space, you add atomic energy into it, you add nuclear energy into it, you add cyberspace into it, you add the information space into it, you add electronic warfare into it, then you add politics into it, you add diplomacy into it, and you add health. Health is weaponized now, right? Health has been weaponized after this COVID has started. Okay, so now if you add all this, we are there. Willy nilly, we are fighting this. If you analyze the Sino-Soviet, not Sino-Soviet, the Sino-Indian clash which has occurred in Ladakh, we've not fired, we've not fired a single round. But every satellites have come into play, electronics have come into play, politics have come into play, cyber attacks have come into play, economics have come into play, the digital world has come into play, sanctions have come into play. So war is no more three-dimensional, confined to land, air, and this thing. It's a nation-to-nation approach. It's a whole of the nation approach. So it's the application of the comprehensive national power, as the Chinese put it. So it's there. What you're saying is there, and we are we are well into it. Later this month, I have to talk about this very thing to the Army War College because there we're going to refine these concepts more because that's where the future is. I hope that answers the query.
Oh yeah, yes, 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 sir. That definitely does.
Yeah.
So we have a question on the communication systems that we use in defense. How indigenized are we on those? And how can we make sure that we kind of reduce the dependence on China? Because even Zoom or any other, I mean, Zoom is something that we use in our communications of late, but other systems.
See, as far as core communication networks and control networks in the army are concerned, we've always had a policy of no Chinese items. Period. Even our weapon system control items, no Chinese items. So, I mean, to the extent that I got into a problem once, there was a computer to be fitted into a fire control system, and that computer had an Intel chip. Now, everyone knows Intel chips are made in China, right? Because that Intel chip was there, people said, "Sorry, we don't need this system. You can't." And I couldn't. We didn't have an alternative to an Intel chip. So we had to go back to an old chip and get hold of someone else from EU and all that, which is one generation old. It's better to have a one generation old system, the chip, because our functions weren't so demanding. It was a little costlier also. So we paid costly, right? So as far as Chinese items in our core systems, no, we don't use them at all. It's only in some peripheral items which we've been using, but I think now that will also go completely. At least in the armed forces, we will not use Chinese items. And in any case, in the armed forces, we hate Chinese items. Right? Let me be very upfront about it. I've never used anything Chinese unless if it's a Sony item made in China, I don't have a choice on it. But if I had to buy any Chinese item, I won't buy it. I would rather pay double the cost and buy it from outside or anything. So that's our approach to the Chinese stuff.
So thank you for that, sir, because that is one of the key reasons why Sambash switched from Zoom to another service provider, primarily for that same reason.
Yeah, in
So
fact, when someone asked me to come on a webinar and said, "Can you come on Zoom?" I said, "Sorry, I will not come on Zoom. You take anything else, will come, but not on Zoom." So I go with it.
okay. So one other question from our audience, they're asking us, like, while thinking of upgrading our systems or machinery, is there a process to it, or does it become ad hoc? So basically, is it proactive approach or is it an ad hoc approach based on?
It's both. It cuts both ways. You have a system, you have to upgrade it. Right? Whenever you have a system, you have a choice of upgrading it or replacing it with a new system. Right? So, see, you buy a system, you have it for a length of time. After that length of time, you have to either replace it or upgrade it. So, you could upgrade it with latest technology, or you buy a new system. It's a matter of what's the time, what's the priority of that equipment, how much money you have, and all those other factors. At times, you don't do anything. You go make do with the old thing if it's okay. You just refurbish it and carry on. So approaches are multifarious. See, there is no single approach or there's no silver bullet for anything. The armed forces are very flexible. We have to be flexible and meet the situation as it comes. Okay, so that's how it is. The, that's all I can say. I mean, I hope it answers the question. Or you
No,
still have,
no, it definitely did. It definitely did.
yeah.
One of the recent topics that was in the news, maybe a year or couple of years ago, was the OROP, the one rank one pension that was implemented. It was quoted as a landmark achievement, but there was a lot of hue and cry about that whole issue. What is your take on the OROP?
See, personally speaking, the OROP which the government of India gave at that point of time, I think was very good. Right? It met 90 to 95% of the aspirations of everyone. I mean, I'm personally not affected because I am from that time where I passed by. The OROP doesn't affect me. So I'm talking to you from a very neutral standpoint. Some part was missing. That's okay. It could have been handled. I felt that both the government and the veterans of that era both couldn't sit across and talk and resolve it. After having gone through all the effort, the government should have had that magnanimity to say, okay, yeah, it's okay. If you have a problem, let me come and sit and talk with you. After all, you serve the nation, you deserve that, and we will talk and we will resolve it. That didn't happen. The veteran leaders of that year who took up and went to and sat on dharna and all that, they should also thought, look, so much has been given. What is left? If the government is, can we go and talk to the government and sit across and be happy with each other? That also didn't happen. So I think it was like a, it was how do I put it? It was bad communication. That's it. I feel it's bad communication. And both where it should have been in a win-win situation, they went into a lose-lose situation reputationally. But individually, I think it's quite a good thing which has happened. Right? It's a lesson learned that whatever you do it well with open lines of communication. Things will happen, and you need to make things happen. You need good lines of communication open. The flip is also right.
I mean, many times we feel like the thought process or the idea is good, but the way it's being communicated, especially in the last few years, is very confusing. It's not direct or straightforward. It's confusing. So people don't know what is going to benefit them or
Yeah.
is something not even going to benefit them. So
In this case, I thought everyone got their due. Like, look, in any system, you'll never get 100%. There's a point where you have to cut and say, okay, this no more. And it had to be both ways. They didn't sit and talk. Otherwise, I'm quite okay with that whole thing, because my friends who benefited from this OROP said, look, we didn't expect this. I mean, those who didn't, not everyone went and protested, after all. People who were not part of the protest and all that were quite happy with the whole story. And for some reason, some of the bureaucrats also played truant. So they spoiled the pitch. Few guys, not all. A lot of them worked for it. I know them. Some of them are good friends of mine. Right? But a few chaps queered the pitch. If someone is queering the pitch and there's no communication between the political masters and the armed forces, things have to go wrong, and that's how it went wrong. It's a case study for bad communications.
and I hope the lesson was learned well.
I hope so. Yeah.
So we have an audience question next
Yeah.
by Mr. Satanathan.
Yeah.
He wants to know, to maintain the physical fitness and updating of the technical knowledge of forces, what is the system that we follow?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
have a lifelong system, right? First and foremost, we have to maintain physical fitness. Unless you're physically fit, you're downgraded, and if you're downgraded, invariably you don't get promoted, unless you are in a particular thing. So every year we go through medical tests and physical tests and all that, and we have to go through, and that's related to age. So if you are in a particular age bracket, you have to go through those tests, right? And physical tests are a continual process. Unless you're physically fit, you can't survive. The second part of the physical fitness is that unless you're physically fit, you really can't enter an operational area or a high altitude. You'll get rejected out. And if you don't do operational tenures, the chances of your going up are very poor. Okay. Now it comes to updating your technical prowess and things like that. All I'll say is Vibha read out a whole lot of places where I studied. Okay, I in my course of 40 years, I've done 2 MSc equivalent courses and one MPhil and a MSc weapon, MSc weapons technology, one MSc defense studies, and 2 MPhil on defense studies from 4 different universities. So it's a lot of talk, a lot of this thing, and plus I did a management course in USA. So you learn all this. Management course on weapon technology is nothing to do with normal management of by selling or buying soap. It's all to do with technology, and it's all with a technological background. So unless we are updated technologically, right, we are out of the equation. I mean, the fact is that I'm an old guy who's not done an engineering degree and I'm teaching in IIT should tell you that the Indian Army ensures that its old people are also technically fit, right? So, I mean, isn't it so? Yeah. I hope that I have answered that question.
Yes.
Yes, sir, and beautifully. And we're not going to check your age or anything like that, but it doesn't appear like you're too old.
No,
uh,
no, I'm 63, 64. I'm pushing 64, so I'm still learning technically. I'm still learning a lot about aerospace. So I learn from my students. I'm learning from all of you. So learning is a process which doesn't stop. Change and learning are two things which are constant in life.
that's a beautiful thing, and I think the audience should definitely take note of these things. That learning never stops, and change is something that always continues. Moving on to another topic that's currently happening in India, in today's age of social media and technology, the youth or the younger people of India believe they can talk what they want, they can do what they want. Freedom is everything, freedom of speech, freedom of this, freedom of that. But back when I was studying in college, we had this NCC, the National Cadet Corps, and it's still there in few colleges, and I'm not sure if it's there everywhere else. I know my parents, when my parents were studying, it was mandatory for them, but by the time I was studying, it was optional for us. And what I learned a lot was discipline, to know what the nation is about, to appreciate what we have today, and more importantly, discipline, to know when to talk, where to talk, how to talk. And when I see these reports of all these youngsters doing things, many of the time they don't even know what they're fighting for, or what they are screaming on Facebook and Twitter about. Do you think we need something like the NCC to become mandatory again, to instill the discipline in the younger generation?
Yeah, I agree with you. There's too much free talk going around. I mean, if you go back to the time when none of the social media was available, or otherwise, whatever your father told you or parents told you, you just did it. Whatever your teacher said, you just did it. There was no talk back, nothing. Today there are too many choices. Well, let me say that you need some to build some kind of discipline into the younger generation. But is it through NCC? Ideal, provided you have it. The NCC is a function of the state governments. If the state governments are prepared to expand and fund the NCC, it can happen, right? The army and the navy and the air force will play up. But unfortunately, with the proliferation of colleges and or population, the NCC system is not able to cope up with it. So, in the alternative, we need to have a different form, maybe something like home guards, or local through police people, or through civic participation of disciplinary classes. I won't say disciplinary classes, classes which teach you integration and all that. So that is something which is required. You brought this up just the other day. The DAV's group of schools which are in Chennai, they asked me, they said, look, can you design a course for us which teaches strategy and tactics, and we'll open this to school kids, we'll open this to colleges, we'll open this to anyone who wants to take it. So I was quite interested. Of course, I had different views that when a chap is in school, he doesn't need to learn tactics. He needs to learn more about fundamentals, right? But this awareness is there. One. Number two, I also feel that the young children today, they want to know more about the armed forces. They want to know about many things. Like my class, I have a class of about 200 people in IIT. It's the biggest class in IIT Madras, and I am oversubscribed. People say, please take us. Why? They want to relate to the armed forces, learn about the armed forces and the discipline and everything. It is not as if the children today or the young people today don't want to learn. For me, it's a great pleasure to teach 200 young kids about something about the army, navy, and the air force, or the weapon systems and fundamentals. And part of the teaching is what you said, general behavior and the nationalistic approach and thinking and all that. So it is required, but I think we need to build it up in the curriculum in a different manner. And the earlier thought process that you have to be nationalistic only if you're in India is also not correct. You can be nationalistic from wherever you are. Part of going out and imbibing a society, imbibing the cultural values of that society, learning to deal with them and coming back and eventually contributing to your own society is also national approach. It builds character in your system, right? You have to integrate with the rest of the world. You can't be isolationist, and away. I have no problem. My own children are abroad, but still, at some point, they'll contribute back to our society here. Unless if they are taught about it. Otherwise, you can keep going around like a kite wherever you want, where the wind takes you. So this is my take on it.
No, that's interesting, sir, because many times when we talk about Sambash to our friends who are still in India, the first thing they'll be like, you're not even here, you don't even know what problems are happening, why you're sitting somewhere else and talking, come here and do something. And my approach is, we are able to do a lot more sitting from where we are than being.
I think, Mohinder, you have to tell them next time that look, as much as I don't know what's happening there, you don't know what's happening here. And unless India knows what's happening outside, India won't progress. I am very clear on that. I mean, we have to learn, why did I go to USA and study management? You mean to say people here can't teach me management? It is not only teaching management, it is learning their cultures.
Right.
Why should an American come and do his staff college with me in Wellington? That interaction has to be there, right?
Yep.
Why should I go to Cambodia and as part of the National Defense College and interact with their leadership? What is Cambodia? Okay, Cambodia is as small as Tamil Nadu, but you still go there. You interact with them. You learn their culture. There are a lot of things about their culture. I mean, the biggest Hindu temple in the world is in Cambodia, Angkor Wat.
Yep.
You get to see that, and you see your own culture outside,
Right.
and so many things, right? So going out is not bad. You must go out. People should go learn and make a mark for themselves there also, and contribute back in whatever form they can. Right? Yeah.
So we have a follow-up question on that. We were talking about NCC and how there should be some kind of a system where we make our youngsters actively involved with what's happening, instill discipline. So in that light, why isn't conscription that is mandatory in some countries like Israel and US not implemented in India? And also another question is, what is the army doing then to attract younger talent? Because
See, conscription is very good in smaller populations or when you need larger armies. Israel, conscription is required because the population is small and they have a lot of enemies and they need an army which is far bigger than their enemies, so they have to go in for conscription. In our country, we can't afford conscription. You can't afford it. You can't afford to have every young man coming into the service and spending 2 to 3 years. Right? We don't need it. One. Number two, we have to differentiate when you talk of conscription and things like that between officers and men. At the men level, who constitute 98% of our population, we have surplus. For every person who wants to get enrolled in the army, 30 chaps to 40 chaps come. At times, I have had cases where, for 100 vacancies, 30,000 people come. A stadium is not enough to conduct tests, and you can't conduct those tests. It's very difficult. At times, we've had to cancel enrollment because of the response we got when we couldn't handle it. So, at the lower level, there's no problem at all. You are oversubscribed, and it's a very great form of employment. So, it's very attractive. Our little problem is in the officers level, right? Because our youth who want to get to be officers, there is again a lot of response to join, but we are not getting the right variety. Why? Because a lot of our the right variety is either going abroad or studying, taking up different avenues, which is available today outside. So that is why we are not getting the best talent for the army, and that's something which we have to live with. We've learned, and now that we've started different forms of commission, we've started getting ladies into the system. Things will improve, right? But I must say that at some point in this, we have not been able to meet our own requirements.
So we don't even see the short service commission ads, etc., in prime time media, and in the front page of a newspaper. It is somewhere in the. I mean,
No,
that's what we notice.
see, we have again short service commission. Unfortunately, this is where the government is a little weak. There's not only this government, even the previous governments. See, short service commission has to be made attractive. Earlier, I mean, very this thing, when I got commissioned, if you did the short service commission, you spent 5 years in the army, and after that 5 years, you could go into the civil services, you could go outside, and you could get into, say, IAS, IPS, and all with 1 or 2 exams less, and
Okay.
your service in the army counted. So his lateral stepping out into other forms of life was good. He got some time to study and get the next degree, the next qualification to enable him to go out. That is something our government has not done. And the army, armed forces, I know, have gone repeatedly to the government and said, make short service, attractive. Ideal thing is the large short service and the small permanent commission, which is a core, hardcore, who will go up, like going through NDA. Like I went to NDA, IMA, and everything hardcore, nothing else except the army, and I'll go up fine. But if you have a big base of short service, it is the ideal. Of course, some people from the short service can become permanent commission also. That's not a problem. But that has not been made attractive. The day that is made attractive, that will be the best. Right? Yeah. And one more thing,
So we have,
surprisingly, China has conscription.
Yes.
Complete PLA is a conscript army. Why there's a conscript army is that they've gone into, from the 70s, they have the one child policy. Because of the one child policy, they don't have enough people to join the army. They're not just coming forth. So they have said everyone must join the army, and everyone must spend minimum 2 years in the army. If you don't spend 2 years in the army, you might not get admission in a college, you might not get a job, you might not get many things. Right? So to that extent, their army is not tough. They're not a professional army like ours. They have problems. So conscription is not a prescription which fits in for everyone. It is horses for courses type. Yeah.
So a couple of our audience questions here. Should we have a mandatory study about the Indian Army or the armed forces at the school level? And along with that is a mandatory army service for at least the NCC cadets, because they go through the army attached camps and those kind of related things.
See, learning and teaching about the armed forces in school is a must as part of the social studies curriculum or whatever you want. That's a given. From the NCC to get into the army has got problems, because what happens is that if you join the army, there are certain mandatory legal issues, right? In enrollment and all, the way our government thing is made out. So everyone from the NCC cannot get into the army. I mean, that's not there. And what level does he get into the army?
Right.
Does he get into the army as a officer? Does he get into the army as a Jawan? There are a lot of questions. So it's best to teach people in the NCC and then let them decide where they want to go. Right? And there is an NCC entry still, so they make use of that. There's no problem on that. Yeah.
Vivaji, go ahead.
Okay, so we had a interesting question on the Martian race theory that is propagated. It was propagated by the British, and we also have our army, which is structured very much like how the British has set it up. We have a lot of follow sub traditions and from that time on. So I want to know what is your take on the Martian race theory?
See, first and foremost, martial races don't exist. Okay, I mean they don't exist. Everyone fights for a cause. If that cause is at your doorstep, you fight at your doorstep. If it the cause is somewhere else, you go and fight there. And everyone becomes martial the moment he is affected.
Yes.
If I am sitting in Tamil Nadu and no one is going to come and attack me, I'm not martial. But if there's a goon who's going to come and attack my house, I become martial because I start fighting with him. So that's where the whole thing takes. This whole story of martial race concept started with the Britishers. It was the British invention. Why was it a British invention? These people, when they came to the North India, they found that a lot of these rajas and kings and emperors, they had armies which were made from local people. So from a village or a group of villages, there was a guy who said, "Okay, I am the leader. I'll get my band of 100, 200 people from my village or from my caste, and I'll support a particular king." So that became a unit, and they could be Gurkhas, they could be Punjabis, they could be Sikhs, they could be Marathas. So those units went and fought, and those units, mind you, to a certain extent, they were mercenary also. They could fight for one side and tomorrow switch allegiances to the next side, because that was how the Indian scene was, the political scene and the princely state scene then. The Britishers found this very good. They said, okay, here is a system where there's a unit is formed out of the same caste and creed, right? And they perform well in battle together. There's homogeneity and things like that. So they took them on, right? Now, with this came the thing that the North India was always under invasion and a lot of fights, and empires came and went and all that. So there's a lot of fighting there. So the people there had to be martial, right? As against South India, people didn't have to be so martial. Okay. So the Britishers felt, oh, these guys fight better, not realizing they fought better because of certain reasons. And they propagated this theory of martial race. It is just that that theory got grounded, and we have, caste and creed based regiments, and we've continued with it. Like I was the other day discussing, uh, I served my entire life with Rajputs. Mine was a Rajput regiment. I know more about Rajput traditions, and Rajputs come from Rajasthan, MP, UP, that belt, Chambal, that area. Some of them are even dacoits. That's on the lighter side, right? So you learned there more, you learned everything, and you found that was an easy way because you're commanding one homogeneous set of people who understand one language, one thinking, one everything. But that is gone. That era has gone. Today the government of India is very clear. We need to have mixed units. All new units which are being raised are mixed. I mean, it's all India, all class. That's the standard definition. It's only for form's sake that the older units of us are still kept on those caste and creed basis, because there's certain traditions going on and things like that, right? And otherwise, there's no this thing. It is no more valid.
Sure. Thank you so much. So, for the paucity of time here, we have one last question for you.
Yeah.
Being so actively involved for so many decades, how did you finally acclimatize to the civilian way of life?
That's a good question. Luckily for me, I had a 2 year exposure to a civilian way of life long back. When I was a major, I was posted to the DRDL, that is Defense Research Development Laboratory in Hyderabad. Those days, Dr. Abdul Kalam was my boss. He was the director of the lab. And Dr. V.K. Saraswat, who's now the Niti Aayog member, the scientific member in the Niti Aayog, he was my immediate boss. Right? He was my project director. In fact, he was not even my project director. He was my deputy project director. So, and that was a totally civilian establishment. So for 2 years, I never wore my uniform. I was, like every other civilian, living life normally. And then one day they asked me, "Are you prepared to quit army and join the DRDL?" I said, "No, I'm not prepared to leave and get till here, because I joined the army. I didn't join DRDL. Or this thing. That's my core. I should go back." And that was when I qualified for the Defense Services Staff College, which is a competitive exam, and I went there. And then after that, but 2 years total civilian life. So when I was finishing my career, uh, again in the last 5 6 years of last yes, what yeah 1 decade of my service, I had a lot of interaction with civilians. I mean, it happens with everyone. It doesn't happen only with me, because you're in the MOD, you're in the army headquarters, you're dealing with all, and you're dealing with all the procurement cases. You're dealing with civilians. You're dealing with L&T. You're dealing with Tatas. You're dealing with Bharat Forge, all these civilian firms. You're dealing with DRDL. You're dealing with DPSUs like Bell and Midani and all everyone, right? You're dealing with the Ordnance Factory Board. They're all civilians, right?
Mm.
At that level, your dealing becomes a lot. After you finish, what shall I say, active command. Okay, when you're a brigade commander, a div commander, or a corps commander, you have to be with troops. But when you come to the army headquarters and you're running projects, right, all these you have to get done through
Regular people.
you know, the larger society, Indian society, which is civilian, and you have to deal with the MOD, which is civilian. You have to deal with other ministries, which are civilian, right? So you start getting used to the fact that you're when your end comes near, you're dealing more with civilians. So to that extent you get acclimatized. And then of course I was lucky in the sense that I had some interaction with IIT Madras, and IIT said, "Will you join us?" Right? So I just switched. But it's good. I'm enjoying life, in the sense that look, all of us who get into the army, wearing a uniform is a passing phase. At some point of time, you have to get back to being a civilian, a normal human being, right? You have to come back to your mother earth and roots. So yeah, I got back. It's only that, and luckily, what I'm doing today has got a lot of value for the armed forces, and I'm still in touch with the armed forces. I write about strategic affairs. I write about modernization. I write about all current affairs. Right. I'm part of a couple of think tanks. I also am a director in L&T for their defense, building their defense ecosystem. So, and plus, I also advise the Tamil Nadu government on development of the defense corridor, right?
Okay.
So, because that's coming up, hopefully in the next 5 6 years it will come up. So they come to me for many things, and I go to them for many things, and I'm trying to bridge the gap between the academia and the defense services. So I'm still in the thing. It's only that I don't wear uniform. Otherwise, I wear a nice cotton shirt and carry on. That's about all.
So, but
Yeah.
I think people from the defense or the armed forces are still superheroes in a common man's clothes. You don't have to wear a uniform to.
We are all common. I mean, it's a matter of opportunity. A person gets an opportunity, he performs whatever role he is destined for. There's nothing special about any of us.
So, just for the audience sake, we Lieutenant General's blog is called gunnerspeak.com, where you can see all his other articles. And so, thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of our discussion series. It was our privilege to have someone of like you to be amongst us, and especially for our audience, we hope everybody has learned as much as we have. And if you have any questions, please do send it across. We will definitely pass it on to you, sir. And we look
Yeah.
forward to having more such sessions with you. So thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Vibha. Thanks a lot, Mohinder.
Uh,
It's a pleasure interacting with both of you. Happy Independence Day to you and everyone who's watching this program. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'll now invite Vibhaji to conclude with the Shanti Mantra.
ॐ सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामय सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।